What's your problem with Whitehead's theology?
I didn't say I had a problem with Whitehead's theology. I guess I just think that... I don't know. I think maybe there's something... I think my turning towards or opening back to the God was through mysticism, Christian mysticism.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just, to the conceptual, almost like capture of describing God as a filter, I just would
that's my word. Whitehead doesn't use filter.
Yeah.
But he does use the word limit. God as a sort of limitation on
that
possibility.
Sounds like the Timaeus, sort of.
Well, right.
Yeah, so I guess I associate that with, like, harmony and, like, measure, or, like,
well, God
cosmos.
Is also the harmonizer.
Yeah.
I mean, filter as in the shaper of chaos into cosmos.
Yeah. I guess when you say filter, it sounds like, to me, like...
It instrumentalizes God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No,
I think of a human artifact.
Well...
And it makes sense that there's a connection between those things, but... And maybe that's just a contemporary term, that it wouldn't have been the same term in the past. But something similar, maybe.
Whitehead, the shortest part of Process and Reality is part 5 on God. And Whitehead says things about God throughout the whole book, but he's only sketching a notion that I think does have actually a lot to do with Christian contemplative traditions and mysticism, Neoplatonic and Kabbalistic and Hermetic forms of esotericism. So it's just a question of what language we use to translate the concept.
Yeah.
And also Whitehead says God's not just a concept.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's good. Good Whitehead.
It's an experience. I mean, he talks about God in terms of God's function in the world, God's cosmological function. But obviously religious experience points, and other exceptional experiences point us far beyond the cosmos. We're far beyond this cosmic epoch. Like, there are these intuitions of eternity and infinity and omnipotence, omniscience, etc. These divine attributes. We intuit them, and they seem to go beyond, they transcend the known universe. Mm-hmm. And Whitehead doesn't deny that. So all of our God talk is relative and should be functional, socially and scientifically. It should do something for us. Otherwise, we shouldn't talk about it.
Yeah.
If God talk is just confusing us or angering us or making us fight or whatever, we should probably not do it.
Mm-hmm.
How do you understand God?
Well, I think of the universe as like a inwardly related, and I think of the sun as a kind of cosmic expression of my orientation towards God. And so I have this sort of phenomenological relationship to that. And
so you worship the sun, or you worship the sun as an image of the divine?
Yeah. No, it's not that I worship the sun, but that my relationship with the sun is sort of like a mediation. Mm-hmm. It's like, it's a symbol. It's like the notion. I think it's connected with the idea of the book of nature.
I like that. I mean, all the
And there's
all the luminaries are
Yeah.
mediators, right?
Well, and this is what divination is premised on, I think. Even just the kind of for example, all the different forms of divination where there's a kind of microcosmic picture of the context and the time that expresses the whole.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also different facets. There's distinctions in the whole. So there's different kinds of archetypal images and relationships.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's also a kind of just to give one example, but this is within the Christian, at least one lineage in Christian mysticism is to describe the higher hierarchies. And it's like this kind of fractal explosion of being.
Dionysus the Areopagite.
Yeah.
Cloud of unknowing.
So then we're like part of that.
Yeah, and the hierarchies are part of us.
Yeah, and I think when the discoveries of ecology scientifically, through as it is understood in the contemporary moment, not to say there was not awareness of what we call ecology or the inward relation of things, but it's conceived in a kind of materialist way. Ecology has been, I think. Not for everyone, obviously, but
You're talking about spiritual ecologies.
well, that's what I think. We through certain sciences, like Lynn Margulies, for example, and the microbiome of Gaia, that this is a description of phenomena at a certain scale that reflects this idea also of like a hierarchical relation to non-physical aspects or dimensions of creation. Isn't that interesting? It's a picture, it's a descriptive image. Yeah.
So God for you is the internal relationship of all things.
Well, it's
within the universe.
It's like the symbol of the sun. It's like it's the center and the periphery. That's why I feel like the sun, is a picture of that in our solar system. And we have.
So is God physical or symbolic?
Well, I think it's all together. So I think the physical is symbolic.
Okay.
It's like a speaking. It's like an ongoing speaking.
Well, I would see. That's that internal relationship among all things in the universe is what I would call the world soul.
Oh, well, yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing
medium.
of which, it's the medium, it's the world as a medium of communication or transmission of feelings, as Whitehead says. But it's
like the cytoplasm. Of course, they're not equivalent, but I like the image. But it is also, spatial.
And it is spatial and temporal and
it is,
historical.
It's the moving image of time.
And so I think the question for Whitehead is is God more than the actual history of the physical world? Or is God the internal relationships manifest in that history?
What was the first thing you said?
Is God more than just the physical history of the universe and its internal relations?
Yes.
What is that?
I can't say.
Right.
It's like, but I think the sun, like, it does give me a feeling for it. Because I can't look at the sun. I mean, we can, but, like, you can't do it for too long or you'll go blind.
Yeah, but it's also so clearly the center of our reality.
Yeah, exactly.
We all of our lives orbit around it. If the sun didn't rise, we'd die in a week.
But, what's so beautiful, as you were describing earlier, is that then we can look at other planets and stars and Earth itself and see God in all kinds of different ways.
Mm-hmm.
But also see the thing itself as something, it's kind of,
So, do we need more than philosophy here? I mean, collectively, how can societies find symbolic forms and like ways of relating to and talking about the divine that are more in harmony with the physical ecology? Because they seem to have detached. Like, Christianity has become more about like this rapture, anticipation that everything physical will simply be vaporized and left behind, and those who are on Team Christ will get whisked away to heaven and safety. And I think that is I think as Steiner would say, a Luciferic, harmonic, collaborative effort to distort Christianity.
He says that it like appeals to the ego, the finite ego.
Right. It's all about personal salvation.
Yeah. And when I'm so glad that's not, I mean, I don't think that's true, but I grew up and that was the imaginary that was mostly conveyed to me by the people around me. But I feel like I knew that they didn't really completely act like that was true.
Well, yeah.
Because otherwise, it's interesting to be living during a time where, because if you think about like during the time of Schelling and Hegel and, Fichte and the concern about atheism then, very different than in our time. Just this relationship to religious beliefs.
Yeah. What does Taylor say? It's like all the options nowadays didn't used to exist. Like the worldview options. I mean, to be an atheist a few hundred years ago was just, it seemed morally implausible,
Well, it was just like an ontological dissonance. There was just people just did not understand what they meant.
Right. Whereas now it's...
And it threatened also
defended
the
in
moral,
public.
narrative. I guess how people make sense of morality.
Yeah. So... religion is in a much different place. I think the move now that we have to make is to not oppose religion and secularity, or religion and science. Science has a worldview, right? We can't oppose these things. Capitalism, because these are all examples of religions.
Yeah.
And scientism or secularism, they're worldviews, they're not just like the default common sense rational truth. They're equally cultural and social constructions. And so how do we get back in touch with what's real? I think that's why the question of the nature of God is worth asking, because what is all this culture for? What is all our art and science for, ultimately?
Well,
unless we have some conscious, considered answer to that question, then we're just running around with our heads chopped off.
Yeah. Well, I think this renewal of the poetic relationship with experience is crucial.
Theopoetics.
Yeah.
It's like a whole genre that I think Catherine Keller is a theopoet. There are many others. I'm not as familiar with the whole
Oh, I remember this, yeah.
Genre, but it's the way to do it.
Yeah.
But it is a divinatory practice, I think. I mean, theopoetics or God talk of any kind, it's divinatory in the sense that it has a theurgic, it has a participatory element, so that you're doing it as much as you are, receiving it.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have faith in it before it will open itself to you.
Yeah.
So you just taking the skeptical stance and saying, prove it, forever shuts you off to the possibility of even considering the possibility of a divine ground.
Yeah, you have to be open-minded. But doubt, I think, in my experience, because I feel I have very much turned toward doubt in my experience, and it's a kind of contracted place.
Mm-hmm.
So you could think of it as as an aspect of a dynamic process,
Mm-hmm.
that it's necessary at some points, but if one becomes rigid in it, then it's not serving the larger movement.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's life, right? The shifting.
But it's also, I see how, doubt is especially tied to the survival, I think, and fear.
Yeah. Well, it's like the primal no to experience, and there's also a primal yes. It's
well, that's the more primary. We already said yes.
Well, that's why we
by
exist.
virtue of being of the cosmos.
Why life is still here.
Yeah. So we have to make the second yes. To invoke.
But life is that rhythm
William
between
Desmond.
yes and no. But it's the gradation between pain and pleasure, and life trying to become more sensitive.
Yeah.
And to find the livable balance between pain and pleasure is it's a delicate dance, because the more sensitive we become to beauty, the more vulnerable we are to pain and suffering. And so, in some way, doubt and faith.
Well, I was just thinking that
it's part of life.
Some contemplative practice seeks to refine our person, our being, our human, as a human being, into an instrument, and that these feelings and this polarity of pleasure and pain, antipathy and sympathy, it's like an organ of perception So that's if you are kind of clean the inner mirror, and then be able to like reflect what is being participated in, and the feeling will convey information, I guess. Not information, but meaning. It's like interpretation or translation.
Hermeneutics.
Yeah, it's a feeling, hermeneutics of feeling.
Yeah.
So then it's interesting, because then I feel like part of what's being emphasized is like the kind of drama of the oscillation between pleasure and pain. But if we're trying to bring them together into like a kind of perfected tension, then to just be able to experience them in a kind of contemplative way as a witness seems part of that.
Well, that's like
me.
Freud had Eros and Thanatos.
Yeah.
And he thought that was all there was. And then, there's the superego that imposes law. But he never got to the love, like agape, as the mediating, synthesizing ground that holds love and strife together. It's like a higher love. It's unconditional.
Yeah. It's cosmic.
It's even transcends the cosmos. Plato says in the Timaeus that the cosmos exists because there's this impulse to friendliness. The universe that is inclined toward friendship.
Yeah.
And the friendship of the planets is what
amity
gives rise to time. And so where does that friendship come from?
He expresses it in the proportions between the elements. That he describes them as in that way. Yeah.
So order is always the achievement of Eros in a Platonic cosmology, and the Eros is a divine is the divine will. But I don't know, God as a word triggers a lot of people too.
I know. I mean, it always has a strong effect on me. But it also, it depends on how I hear it said.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, in some contexts, when people bring up God, I'm just like, no, I don't think
I feel like that's idolatry.
Works in this context.
Gosh.
But what are the contexts where it's appropriate, and why? What contexts are those where using the God word is appropriate?
Well, I think it is based on who is speaking it. Because you can imagine all kinds of situations, but I think it really depends on who's speaking it.
And who's being spoken to?
Sure.
So, upaya.
Yeah.
Skillful
But
means.
I think also virtue. I mean, because I think virtue would confer the capacity to use that word.
There's nothing worse than God being used as a weapon.
That's idolatry.
To put people down or to damn people. I think it's one of my top 5 favorite Bible verses where Jesus tells the Pharisees accusing a woman of adultery. He's just like, let he among you who is free of sin be the first to cast a stone.
Yeah.
And I just feel like that's got to be one of your top 5 moral codes.
Yeah. It's so sassy. I love it.
Leave the judging to God, and that's why it's important that God be transcendent. You don't get to be the judge. The judge transcends you.
Yes. Well, and it's not okay. One of the things that I've heard stressed recently when thinking about this is to stress the non-competitive relationship between
transcendence and
creature
immanence.
and creator.
Yeah, non-competitive.
It's like it's not a power thing.
Yeah.
Not in that sense. There's power, but it's creative.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like that quote, the Foucault quote about power.
Yeah.
Where you hear, I guess, read a side of power that is positive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's like it's always more than power. It's wisdom as well.
I love the line from Whitehead's book, I think Religion in the Making, where he says the power of God is the worship that God inspires. So power becomes relational in that way, and without the love of creatures for their creator, the creator cannot create them.
Mm-hmm.
It all falls apart. And indeed, in some sense, that's what happened. That's what the fall is the creatures forget how or choose not to love the creator, to love themselves.
Yeah.
Which in a way, why shouldn't they love themselves? They're made in the image of God.
Mm-hmm.
And so that sets off man on his historical journey toward the apocalypse, the inevitable ending. And the Bible just tries to tell us that what is all of that? I mean, what is history from the biblical point of view, from the God's eye view? I mean, it's folly. That's what Paul says. He says the wisdom of the Greeks is folly too. If it doesn't include the sacrifice of Jesus and the resurrection of Christ, if it doesn't include that, then it's folly.
Mm-hmm.
Paul himself was like applying Greek ideas, but he says it needs to include Christ. Hello?
Because otherwise, there would be no redemption.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's no fall either for the Greeks.
Well, there were golden ages.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a similar kind of nostalgia. But I could be incorrect in my understanding of what it meant to them, and who it meant anything to.
Yeah, but I think, there's ways of reading the Bible, like the book of Genesis. I've learned a lot from Catherine Keller on this, is, God creates with the world, not out of nothing by fiat. God creates cooperatively, and
you could also say ex nihilo, and I think that's also a very profound, because it's sort of like logical in a way that
as long as nothing is something positive.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so nothing is just the most we could say about it.
Nothing is not nothing. It's a material.
Who said that? We heard somebody say that recently.
It might have been Jason Ananda, Josephson Storm.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know. But
it was someone.
Yeah, I mean, even Plato says in the Sophist, non-being is a kind of being.
Yeah.
So
it's like counter space, right?
Creatio
ex
nihilo is not. It doesn't necessarily imply that God was alone in the beginning.
Yeah, well, I guess.
Although
I don't know if it doesn't even make sense to speak that way to me. About it.
Whitehead says, in a way, God was alone in the beginning because his primordial nature of God is unconscious.
Well, I think there's a that's poetic.
Mm-hmm.
It does convey a truth, I think, because it's like a paradox. It's like alone in the beginning.
Yeah.
Because it also, it kind of, it's this space-time confounding.
Mm-hmm.
It's like alone in the beginning, but I have all kinds of things around me. And I'm not at the beginning.
The origin of space-time is it's always going to be still present.
Yeah.
Because the origin is not anywhere in space-time. It is that out of which space-time exfoliates, and...
So we have descriptions of that in physics, would you say?
Well, sure.
With the radioactive or whatever.
The
feedback.
Microwave background radiation and...
Yes.
all sorts of other
or
distant...
the light, the light, as Brian says.
Yeah, Brian Swim, the light from the origin of the universe is raining down upon us.
Oh my gosh, what? When you think about, you don't actually see light anywhere,
mm-hmm.
Then if you think about that more, then it's kind of like, oh, you can't see it. You can only see it reflecting.
Mm-hmm.
And so then it's like the photons everywhere. It's not just on your hand.
Well, right. And the light's reflecting off of matter, but matter is just a slower vibration of light.
Yeah.
Or a different... it's light spinning around itself.
I don't know what it is.
Gravity. But
coagulation. Or the appearance of coagulation. For us.
So, what about theodicy? How does evil fit into your divinely attuned
this is a good question.
Universe?
I don't know.
Yeah, well, it's a tough one. It's a toughie.
Oh, it's one of the, I think, principal, I don't know, in philosophy there are mystery themes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think evil is one of them, or theodicy.
Yeah, well, I think that's a good start, is to say you don't know and leave evil as a mystery.